Hi, everyone. Welcome to TRG 30. TRG 30, where we're talking always about bold change for our sector's resilience and resilience. Today, the topic is indeed resiliency, your personal resiliency now at this time when I feel us all reconciling personally and organizationally the real long haul nature of this pandemic, the associated crises. Today, we'll be having that conversation with Dr. Michael Maddaus. But before I introduce him, as always, I want to cue you up to listen for some things. First of all, your own self-assessment. Is your tank full? And if not, do you have a plan for replenishing it? Second, modeling, especially for you who lead in this room. Your behavior helps define culture in your organization. Are you aware of how your behavior is contributing to that culture? And finally, belief. I want you to listen to your guts, to your bellies right now, and then repeat after me. We can do this. We can do this. So Dr. Michael Maddaus is going to tell us how. Dr. Maddaus, thank you for joining us today. And I am delighted to have you talk with me today about our sector and the personal resilience that people need at this time. Can you introduce yourself to our group? You do such a wonderful job of it.
I should be able to do that by now at 66 years old, right? I grew up in the Twin Cities, and I was a child of a single mother born out of wedlock, and she was a waitress. We were poor. And she ended up marrying a man who was an alcoholic and ex-Navy, and the house descended into chaos and alcoholism and violence and suicide attempts. And as a result, I hit the streets to be away. I was an only child and ended up in a lot of trouble from age 13 to 17, arrested 24 times, in and out of reform schools. And basically, to avoid prison, I dropped out of high school and, joined the Navy. After the Navy, I got my GED, went to school and, worked my ass off, to put it mildly. And eventually, because of vocational interest tests, said I should be a doctor. Well, I decided to go to medical school. And so I did, and I ended up doing very well and went to general surgical training and then thoracic surgical training in Toronto, and came back to the University of Minnesota, and I had a 20-year career there that was great. Became a full professor, endowed chair, a vice chair of the department, all these things, all these accolades. But at age 57, roughly, I found myself, some people would call it burned out. I was miserable and I was dreading going to work. I wasn't enjoying the operating room anymore. And I had become so overextended as a result of one of my habits of saying yes to everything, which we were trained to do in the surgical residency. And of course, part of the thing is residency taught me or installed 4 habits onto my personal operating system that, played a huge role. And one of them was say yes to everything, no matter what. And the next one is discipline, to be strong, no matter what. And self-sufficiency, so you can do everything on your own, no matter what. And of course, the be strong habit, so you can pretend you're okay, even when you're not, no matter what. Well, those things served me extremely well, of course, until I wasn't okay, no matter what. And so then, the one tactic that I had in my toolkit for managing my stress and getting me to calm down was exercise and running and lifting weights, which I'd done all along, and I was rapid about it. And then back troubles led to a 5-level lumbar fusion and ultimately 2 hip replacements. And because I had buddies at the university, I got hooked up with a guy who gave me free flow of narcotics, and I got addicted to prescription narcotics. And that was a slow 18-month spiral down into a hellhole that I had never experienced before. So I ended up admitting myself to Hazelden without any consequences to my job or family or anything else, thankfully. But that was a real, seismic cataclysmic event, because overnight, I went from, full professor, endowed chair, all
Oh,
the trappings, to
yeah.
just another miserable drug addict in rehab, right? All right. And I mean, I was miserable. In fact, I was voted least likely to succeed by my fellow inmates. But and that's not very good. If you're in rehab and you're voted least likely to succeed, that's not good.
Oh, God.
Well, but I realized what I really did understand was that, my operating system, as I now call it, previously had served me in the American dream, but it wasn't serving me in my personal life. And so I didn't know what to do, and I didn't like the AA 12-step program, and I didn't like being labeled an addict. So I decided I was going to figure out whatever it is that I needed to do with my personal operating system to, reinvent myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's basically the genesis of why I'm here today, I
Yeah,
think.
there is so much there, and this personal operating system is something that we're absolutely going to talk about.
Yeah.
Who knew there were, most likely to succeed in other labels within recovery locations. But listen, speaking of recovery, I got an email recently from one of the most successful and buoyant leaders in our sector, but that this person would say these things that I want to read to you and everyone. It's just a reflection of the kind of place that our sector is in right now, as we've been talking about in
Hmm.
advance. And she
Hmm.
says this: I've been on calls with friends, and I have to say that this extended intermission that we're in is really wreaking havoc on the mental health of leaders. There's a great meme going around. I can't put my fingers on it, but it's basically, I can't wait to introduce my situational depression around COVID to my seasonal affect depression.
They'll be buddies.
Yeah, so she said, here are just a few comments from colleague conversations in the past 48 hours. One, I'm desperately searching for alternate sources of joy. Everything tastes like nothing.
Mm.
Not knowing the distance of the race, I just keep sprinting to this imaginary finish line. And I hate what this job has become. I can't believe, actually, I'm the best person to keep doing it.
Yeah.
So, this personal operating system, certainly these folks are not in an operating room. They're not thoracic surgeons where things are life and death. But we are struggling mightily with a long haul, long impact of this pandemic. So you've written about this. You have a point of view about this. How do we use how do we think about a personal operating system to help get out of this place?
Yeah. So I wish we had a couple hours to talk about this, but
Yeah.
so to what that statement, there's two elements to that statement that I think are really worth focusing on. One is this idea of a finish line. Okay.
Yeah.
That's potentially problematic because it's a goal-oriented process, and we are stuck in a zone where there is no immediate goal available to us. We are in a miserable sort of hell here.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of when I was in Hazelden and the process afterwards, when I actually retired from surgery and became a house husband for a couple of years. There was a deep level of a need to fully accept in my bones the reality of my situation. And what I found is that a lot of people resist things. It's when it's unpleasant, reality is banging on your door. But when we resist it, that's what causes suffering. It
Mm.
does, pain is going to be present. This is a very painful environment, so painful. But the more we resist it and not totally like accept it and relax around this fact and forget about this finish line, that creates suffering. So it's a formula: pain times resistance, meaning complaining, feeling sorry for yourself, all these sorts of things that causes suffering, unnecessary suffering. And wisdom is really, in my opinion, all about not doing things that make things worse. Don't do the things that cause suffering by complaining or being angry or anything else. You've got to be able to sit with pain and discomfort and be okay with it, you know. So that for me was a profound revelation. And when I saw that formula written up on a board at Hazelden, that was a beginning of kind of my exploration of these new ways of thinking and doing things.
Yeah, and you've written about them. You know, there's a
Yeah,
paper that we're
yeah,
going to make available to this group afterwards where that you know, it's the resiliency or resilience bank account, the
right.
specific skills. What are they? Let's talk about those.
Well, as a small backdrop, I just want to
Yeah.
point
Yeah.
out that within the brain, there are two fundamental reward mechanisms that make us feel good. One is driven by dopamine, and the other one by another set of molecules called the here and now molecules. All right. And I didn't have the space in the paper to write about this. So, dopamine is the future reward system,
Mhm.
and here and now are the here and now reward system. So, what are those two things? The future reward system is literally the reward and the feeling good that we get when we do anything literally out of arm's reach. And I mean literally out of arm's reach. Okay. So that means we can imagine our prefrontal cortex is basically a simulation machine. And that's where humans, that's why we dominate the earth, is because we can simulate, you
Hmm.
know, liver and onion ice cream. And we don't need to make it to prove it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
but anything we can think of from, you know, okay, I want a peach over there in the bowl across the room. I got to get up and go get it, to, you know, Elon Musk building electric cars and
Right.
changing the face of that whole world,
Right.
all driven by the future reward system. And that's what feels so good when we're the motivation and all that stuff is driven in the future reward system by dopamine. And that's the American dream in action. Okay. Now, the other side of the coin, the here and now, is what gets left in the dust with
Hmm.
the American dream when the future reward system just dominates everything.
Hmm.
And what's that here and now stuff? Well, it's that moment when I was at Hazelden and I walked out and it was starting to be spring in April, and I heard this little bird singing. And I looked up and it was a black-capped chickadee, and it's the peculiar tone to the bird. And I still can see the bird on the branch and everything else because it was the first time in a long time that I'd been really present to something like that.
Mhm.
You know, my
Mhm.
whole life had been in overdrive and
Mhm.
pushing.
Mhm.
And so the here and now reward system is anything that's literally again within arm's reach. So it's holding hands with someone you care about. It's savoring a meal. It's the smell of something. It's petting your pet and actually being present for it. It's making love. It's all these little things, being out on a walk in nature. So it's no accident that these sort of woo-woo things, some of you might call it, gratitude, critical. All right. So
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
a big part of the here and now system. Connection with others, actually being vulnerable and having conversations with people that you care about. These are all driven, they surface in the here and now reward system through four other molecules: brain endorphins, endocannabinoids, serotonin, and oxytocin.
Mhm.
And so this stuff's real. And this is why when we don't engage in these things in the here and now, we end up suffering, just like I did at the peak of my career. And so that's been the big shift. And that's why I wrote the paper, The Resilience Bank Account, because a lot of that is focused on, you know, the here and now: gratitude, connection, meditation. And meditation is really the tool that allows you to really be present in things, which is something I think a skill that a lot of us don't have for these here and now activities. So that was a mouthful. I hope it wasn't too much, but
No,
trying to
so
make it.
the future piece is what's, you know, I'm guessing in the room, that that is what I, myself too, we're collectively freaked out about,
Yeah,
and in crisis about. How can we survive? We had an idea about what the future would be, or we were trucking along, and that has been completely disrupted. So now what you're saying is, because I want to get to what do you mean? Like what can I do if I
hmm,
say, all right, I think it's a little woo-woo. I don't, but personally, by the way, but if I do, what is it? What do I have to do? And what do you mean my personal operating system?
so uh, let me just get on the future thing and then I'll tell you the
Yeah.
operating system.
Yeah. Okay.
This is why there's so much misery, because our dopamine levels have been dumped into the river of uncertainty. Okay.
Yeah.
And we're left with a molecule in the brain that's dominating now, norepinephrine. It makes us feel anxious, crummy all the time.
Mm.
But when it's paired up with dopamine, we feel activated and motivated. But
Mm.
dopamine's gone.
Mm.
And I thought what Joseph Hodge talked about so perfectly
Yeah.
outlines everything I've said, because he said we had to face reality and accept this season was over, is just done. And we weren't going to pretend and hope that we could come back, in January, February, March, like he said, cutting 2 inches of the arm off at a time, if you remember that.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. But what he came to was the idea that, the Christmas Carol, that you could take the 4 novellas and do 4 actors for each novella, and then bring those out to, the world in some smaller way, virtually.
Mhm.
The point there is that's a little dopamine project. It's
Mm.
creative and it's doing something that's out there in the future. And I bet it felt good to them to come up with that.
Oh, I'm
And
sure. God, I'm
yeah,
sure.
and it's brain. You're actually leveraging the brain. So this is the key in this environment. Scale back, think of small things that you can do that will move the needle forward in whatever way, and accept reality. So this is how it all works. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, okay. So we had a conversation about personal resiliency and organizational resiliency. If I am leading, I am. So, I'm leading an organization that's affected by this. What am I to do? And how would what I could do have an impact on my organization's resiliency?
Hmm.
So, me personally, I just heard you say take a small thing. That's an organizational thing. What do I do personally?
In your own life
Yeah,
personally.
tell me some
Yeah,
things.
yeah. Well, for me, I'll give you a silly example. All
Yeah.
right. So I work from home, and I am absolutely affected by this. The day-to-day potential malaise. I wake up, I'm there one Sunday, I didn't even know what day it was. I actually couldn't remember what day it was.
Mhm.
Uh, and so I do small projects that are meaningful to me. The key about doing small things, they have to mean something to you. All right. You can't be just doing things to do things.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that Joseph talked about. Don't just do things to do things. It has to have some meaning to you. And I like taking care of my family and my house. I mean, I really enjoy that sort of thing. So I changed all the shower heads because they were full of calcium and they were a mess. And it sounds crazy, but it was a small project. It gave me something focused. I felt good about it. My family enjoyed it because now the shower heads were working, and it's really scaled down, but it shows the principle of doing something that is meaningful to you that can often benefit others. And that works. It just plain works. And it
Mhm.
can be meaningful to you, whatever it is, small things, but you got to get deliberate and intentional about it.
Mhm. Okay, I think as Stephen will come on, I know with questions, but something that I know is in the room collectively and that you've faced as you've talked about this is sort of the collective eye roll around the notion of the short term small steps you can take, meditation and otherwise. Where how do you deal with resistance when you talk about this? What does it look like, and how might you characterize combating it?
Yeah. Well, so the personal operating system, and we wanted to touch on that a moment, like you had asked.
Yeah.
I, I see our lives, virtually all of us, in fact, as coming through our childhood and then our career and other major life events. And in that process, a lot of uh, habits are installed and ways of doing things and seeing the world. And we end up with a personal operating system or a mental operating system that may serve us well, like it did in my career aspirations, but it
Mhm.
may not serve us well in other areas. And so my endeavor was to take to the science after I got out of Hazelwood and figure out what are the best options to actually intentionally build my personal operating
Uh-huh.
system. And so based on the science, that's why I whittled it down to core things like connection, gratitude, meditation, and self-compassion,
Uh-huh.
being kind to ourselves.
Okay.
And so the eye rolling, one of the problems with these sorts of softer skills and the here and now habits is that they're not so immediately evident as, say, somebody who or desires to take on building their body or becoming in shape and fit, right?
Right.
You can see it. It's really easy to see it and feel it. You go to the gym one day and you're stiff, or
Right.
you run and you're kind of miserable the next day. You meditate and probably all you do is sit there in frustration, frankly, the first times that you do it. Or you say thank you more than you normally do. It just doesn't seem to have the same impact. And I remember my counselor at Hazelden would always badger me about keeping a gratitude journal and writing 3 things in it that you're grateful for every day.
Yeah.
And I mean, he drove me crazy, and I just didn't think it was strong enough to make
Yeah.
any difference.
Yeah.
But it does. It's no different than building, working physically and to improve yourself. It's improving your mental operating system. It's a slower process, but it works, and it starts to work over 6 to 12 months if you do it regularly. And I think one of the core things are gratitude, making time to connect with people, and then being mindful, whatever that means to people. But I think meditation is the most powerful tool for that process.
Stephen, you're with us.
Uh,
Take us.
that resonates really personally, Michael. There's an app called Three Good Things that I downloaded, and I know if you've watched The Social Dilemma, anything that's more addictive to your phone,
Oh God, yeah.
but it does ping a notification to remind you to
Yeah.
put your 3, and that simple act every day can make small adjustments. Well, there's some in-depth questions coming in. Bradley says he can absolutely see the overlaps between the life of a surgeon and the life of an arts worker. Burning the candle at both ends to serve those two needers,
Yep.
but our internal stakeholders are at times just as vulnerable as those we claim to serve in our missions, visions, values, and grant applications. Can you speak to approaches that care for the caregivers? Are there ways we can support each other simultaneously as we work to serve our communities?
Well, in the world of organizational, I really feel that leaders have an obligation to care about the mental operating system of their organization. And insofar as that's concerned, there's key aspects. One is valuing people and showing gratitude to people. And I've got a huge box full of gratitude letters and cards for my patients. And every time I got one, I mean, it just had such a wonderful impact on me. And I would bet that there's nobody here, when you're thanked genuinely with appreciation, tell me that doesn't feel good. And so any opportunity we have to show genuine appreciation to somebody. And again, that's where the mindfulness piece comes in, because if you're not aware, if you're just so busy with the transactions of the day and you don't see people and value them and make the time to notice those little things that create that glue of social harmony that is so wonderful to live in, that's what we need to do, in my opinion, collectively with everybody everywhere.
And you've got to be intentional now because everything's like this now. We
That's
don't
right.
bump into
Yeah,
each other in the hallway.
that's
So
right.
creating intention around that feels really key, Stephen.
And
There's a theme with Michael and Rahaf previously a few weeks ago, investing time for personal resilience. How can I justify taking the time when my organization, my team needs so much? As a servant leader, shouldn't I focus on their needs before my own?
no, I'm sure it's a tired cliche, but it's, the mask in the airplane. You got to put the mask on first. And there's no question about that. I could make the same sort of and I don't mean this in a critical way, absorbed way that, I'm so valuable and I'm a leader. So therefore I've got to be all in on this, and the fact is when I show up at work, to operate, I got to be at my best self, You cannot give your best self if you're not your best self. You can't give the energy and the creativity and the problem solving and all the stuff that's so desperately needed if you're burning the candle on both ends and you're not even tuned into these things. I know for a fact that if you're not feeling your greatest, you're probably not going to be paying attention to people the way you should or able to connect. It's very rough. We're human beings. We have a brain that requires sleep, good nutrition, exercise. It's the car. You wouldn't run the car to death, and we've got to take care of ourselves.
This is like the thing that I want this group to hear. Mapping out time for your physical, your spiritual, whatever that means to you, and your mental space. It is an investment that returns, and that I would advocate actually is part of the reason that we feel the way that we feel. So
It is.
paradigm shift that says invest so that you can give. Boy, Steve.
If it doesn't get on the calendar, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so for me, I like to get up early in the morning,
Yeah.
4:30 to 5. My thing is I sit down and I read, and then I do my gratitude journal, then I meditate, and that's the schedule. All right. Yeah. And it's so easy to let that stuff get by the wayside. Even me, I sit there and I think, I should go start writing now. I'll just skip that today.
Right.
But I know better.
Right.
I know where it leads. And when I've done that, I find myself slowly, I call it the slow downward spiral into my mood and state slowly changes. It does. But if I sit there and I'm doing my gratitude journal, not just writing things, but actually thinking and reliving, the meal that I had with my wife the night before, or the phone call that I had with my daughter, and I'm actually immersing myself in it. I feel good when I start the day. It really works.
It's that
priming the pump.
Yeah, right.
Chemistry.
Right.
Yeah.
Stephen, we have time for one more, I think, maybe.
Yeah, Kelly asks, how might you deal with questioning if you're the right person for the role of leader when everything seems so hard?
Well, there's a very famous investor named Chamath. I can't pronounce his last name, Paul Mattei or something. He's a billionaire. And this is a guy you see on CNBC and all over the place. And I listened to a podcast by him recently, and he is like magnificent. I mean, this is a guy you listen to and you think, this man has got his shit together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there saying, I feel like I'm not capable, or I'm an imposter. He constantly is doubting himself. All right. My answer to that is, I feel it the same, but your self-doubt never helped anybody. Okay. Just doesn't help anybody. You got to just kind of work past it and keep going and believe that you've got something to offer.
Believe we can do this. Okay.
That's right.
So stick with us. We have a couple more TRG 30s coming between now and the end of the year, you all. And I want to remind you about what's up next. Super interesting origin story with the North Carolina Symphony and how that this time is giving them an ability to adapt thinking. We're going to be talking to Home in Manchester in the UK about their specific roadmap. I think that there is an opportunity for us to be more creative. And I want to talk with you as a part 2 about that, building on this conversation and the one that we had with Rahav and Hustle and Float. So more of that to come. As always, we want to share with you a little bit of data from this time from our benchmark. Ticket sales revenues, we know, have been down by 80 to 90% in both America and the UK. But look at donation and philanthropic revenues. 63% down, but not 90 in the UK, and just 24% in North America. And plus, in North America, there's been an actual increase in the number of gifts. So this surge of ticket donations, you have a stewardship opportunity here, reaching out to them, connecting with them before your calendar year end campaigns, critical. And from campaign building to long haul support, at TRG, we are here to help you build resiliency and relationships and manage all of these issues around scarcity that we've got in front of us. Michael, I'd love for you to come right back online right now with us and give us some, I don't know what, say something brilliant, Michael. Just send us off, would you?
Well, just I guess if I was one thing I did want to say is that the creativity piece is so important in this time. And, and the creativity is actually a blending of the future and the here and now. You're doing something that is out in the future, a dream, an image, an idea, but you're working with your hands or something to create something. So that's the perfect place to leverage both reward systems is in the creativity process. So do whatever you can in this environment to leverage both of those in some creative way. And that's the way to get through this and look at it as an opportunity to reinvent things in some small way.
Dr. Michael Maddaus, we'll be forwarding your paper on. It's such a pleasure to know you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
making time to
You
talk
bet.
this sector today. And everyone, thanks for joining us for TRG 30.
Thank you, bye everyone.